Okay, my dears, I am back with another wonderful lesson to hopefully help you keep writing and shed some light on a particular issue that you may or may not have thought of, or you may or may not have considered. Maybe you took 1 second and made a decision and you're sticking with it, and that's fine, and I love that. So this may not be for you, but this video is about whether or not you should choose a pen name and write under a pen name, or own up and write under your own name. Now, I say it like that, and I don't want to discredit anyone who chooses a pen name because they can come with their benefits. So let's talk about that. That is what I want to talk about. What are the pros and cons of writing under a pen name? And hopefully this will help you make a decision and stick with it. Because here's the thing. If you decide to write under a pen name now and you continue to write in the future, you're going to probably need to stick with it for the rest of your life. So let's talk about this. Now, I will preface this discussion by saying I think pen names might be a bit more common in the fiction field, the fiction genre, because it seems to be a little bit more accepted to write your like a fiction tale, a made-up story under a made-up name. For memoir, for me as a reader, if I found out that my memoirist that I just read was writing under a pen name, I might feel a little cheated. I might feel a little like, what are they trying to hide? Now, I definitely understand why there are some stories that you really don't feel comfortable publishing under your legal name. And there may be many reasons for that. We're going to talk about this. But I do want you to consider the pros and cons, so let's jump in. Now, the pros, obviously, I just kind of said that one big one that I think sway many memoirists in that direction, and that's just to hide your true identity. There might be a story that you're telling that you really don't want associated with you or your family. Your family might have voiced some very, very strong concerns about this that have swayed you to make this decision, and I totally respect that because family is important. And you have to, at some point, decide whether you're willing to risk those relationships, because it can truly lead to very irreversible harm done to relationships if you go against some family wishes. We're not going to get into that here, family drama, but that is a huge, huge pro, a huge benefit to using a pen name. That being said, using a pen name might not solve your whole problem. You may need to change and shift details in your story. And if you're really going in that direction, you may go back to my video on whether or not you're writing fiction or memoir, because you may need to choose fiction at that point. So again, that is a pro, to hide your true identity. Another pro, which I have personal thoughts about, is that choosing a pen name can help you stand out and really be uniquely identified, is how I should say it. When I first started writing, I am Danielle Anderson, not by birth. That is my married name. And my maiden name is not much better. And I just thought, what a boring name. What a boring, unidentifiable name. And I really wanted to write under a name that would be uniquely identified, that no one could say like, oh, I don't know her by that name. I guess they would probably say like, oh, I know exactly who that is. There's not another option to choose from, right? Like there's one Oprah. I'm sure there's many Oprahs out there, but there's only one Oprah Winfrey, right? So that is kind of the vision I had for when I started writing. And I'll go into why I chose to ditch that line of thinking. But I was so disappointed with how generic and boring my name really was that I really considered this closely and looked into whether this would work for me and my goals in the future, and I decided not to. So we'll talk about that next. But another benefit to using a pen name is that you can kind of take on a bit of a different persona. You can put a little costume on and put yourself into this headspace of, this is who I am now while I write under this name. And I will say, I don't think this applies very widely to memoirists, because you're writing as you. You're writing as who you maybe used to be in the past, but that doesn't necessarily mean you've changed much in the way of like your persona, your personality, who you really are to your core. That being said, you may have actually gone through a name change process. Maybe this is like you kind of rebirthing yourself and, hey, I'm now this person after I went through this. I actually am working with an author who his intro is discusses this name change and why this was so meaningful to him and why he chose to do it. So it's not necessarily a pen name, but it gives him that persona that he can write under, because that's who he chose to be. And then he writes about his previous self, I guess, if you will, his previous name and who he was under that name. So that one isn't as big of a consideration in my book. That would sway you to use a pen name, but that is something that a lot of fiction writers are drawn to in their decision. Those, I think, are the main benefits. The cons are, in my perspective, the cons are kind of weighty. They carry a lot of weight. If you're comfortable sharing your story under your name, or think you can become comfortable, it might take a little time. It might take some practice. It might take, really working up that courage, and that might be a process, and that's okay. But if you think there's a possibility that you're going to be comfortable in the future, that you're working on this, I want you to consider these cons closely, because they might change your decision to ditch the pen name and just wait until you're ready. Number one con that I see, you have to start with a zero built-in supporters. You have no audience built in. You have no followers. No one knows you. You have no friends. You're a stranger out in the middle of the desert talking to no one. Maybe you're already writing under a pen name and you have a small following. This is not the con for you. This is the con for someone who says, okay, this is my name. This is who I'm writing under. You have no supporters at all. You have no one to jump start your book campaign, your book support. You can't even talk about it really with anyone, because if they know you under your current name and you're talking about it, then you publish it, like under a different name, they're going to go, wait a second. So you really have no tribe. You have no people there with you during this process or after you publish. You have to start from scratch, and there's no connection. You can't say like, oh, hey, Jane, I'm friends with Sally over here, and she, you can't do that. There's no connections. So from a marketing perspective and from a publisher's perspective, this is going to be a huge, huge drawback. And if you don't care about selling books, if you don't care about getting published or having a wide readership, maybe this means nothing to you. That's totally your call. I just think it's something to consider very, very carefully. That being said, it's not impossible to start your audience from the ground up. It's not impossible to start build an author website and get that shared and promoted and all of that. It's not impossible. It's just going to be difficult. I think it's going to be more difficult. So that's con number one. The second con that I want you to consider is that you can really lose your voice. In the same way that fiction authors, I think, are drawn to that benefit of being able to put on a persona. If you take off your Danielle hat, in my case, if I take off my hat, will I lose some of that Danielle-ishness? Will I lose some of my unique, authentic voice? I think it's possible. I think that if you're writing from a pen name, you really almost have to invent that character and get inside that character's head in order to know who you're writing from. And this is actually an exercise I did when I was going through this should I or shouldn't I debate. I was like, who is this girl, this name I chose? What what is she like? What does she say? What does she do? And then it all kind of came down to sounding just like me. So I decided that I'm not very good at pretending. I'm not a good actress. I'm not in the acting field. I don't know how to be anyone but me, and I don't want to lose any of that. So that was a huge drawback for me, that I wasn't able to truly be myself if I wasn't really writing under my own name. I think this is really huge for memoirists too, because you really do have to own who you are and own your story and own what you're sharing from your perspective in order for it to really be as powerful and as engaging as it can be. So that is a concern I want you to think about. And last but not least, you really never can take credit for your work, even years down the road. Think of a fiction author who's written under a pen name and like can't go to dinner parties and talk about their work, can't meet their third wife or third husband or whatever and talk about what they do. They can talk, maybe at that point you do, but you don't share this publicly. You keep a pen name because you don't want anyone to know who you are underneath the pen name. So you can't really run around and talk about it and take credit. What if you have like this amazing book that sells millions of copies? You don't get to talk about that to your personal feed, your personal followers, your personal friends and family. You really don't. You have to kind of make it all up. There might obviously be exceptions to that rule. Maybe your spouse knows your big dirty secret, but but other than that, you really, even 20, 30, 40 years later, you can't say, by the way, like I'm that person that wrote that thing, without getting some backlash. I think is the caveat there. You can do it, but I don't know how well it works out. So consider these things when you're thinking about your pen name. Maybe you're at the point you've already decided and you're like fast forwarding this video going like, where's the next one, girl? Where's the next one, Danielle? I don't need to hear this, and that's fine. But for those of you who are still considering this, think about these things, take some time, don't rush this decision. I don't necessarily recommend like striking up conversations with everyone around you about this, because they're going to all have their own opinions based on their own perspectives. But, poll your audience, I guess, is a term I would use, meaning ask your close friends if you need to, your close family. What do you guys think about this? I'm torn. But consider these things and don't dive in without feeling very confident that you're okay committing to your decision forever until the end of time. You have to be this person forever. So that is my video today. It's not necessarily going to keep you writing, because you should already be writing every day. It's not necessarily going to stop you from writing in order to choose a pen name if you're really going to go down this route. But I do want you to start thinking about this if you need to make this decision still. Don't delay. Don't wait until the last minute. You want to kind of get this made up now versus later, or soon versus later. So that is it for today. I will see you in the next video, where we're going to talk about some more nitty-gritty structure stuff. So I will see you soon.